Hey, I'm Scott. I play bass in the band Time. I'm going to walk you through my rig. So first I want to start with my instruments. This is the bass I probably use the most in Time. It looks like a Fender jazz bass, but it's actually not stock. I cobbled it together from a bunch of different pieces. This is a US maple neck that I ordered directly through Fender. This is a 77 reissue body that I got from Reverb. This is a Hipshot bridge because I think Fender stock bridges are trash if they don't go through the body. Sorry, Fender. These are Seymour Duncan Apollo stacked humbuckers. This is a great bass in Time. There's 3 guitar players, so there's chords happening all over the place. And something that's percussive and cuts through a little bit more is kind of the way I like to go. So that's why I tend to use this bass. I also really like the playability of the neck, and maple just has a certain kind of like thwack to it that I don't get out of rosewood. So I've always really liked jazz basses. I've always been like a Fender player, at least since the early part of the 2000s, and I don't see myself going a different way. So that's this bass. It was put together, all the pieces were put together by Nick of Bearded Guitar Repair, so shout out to him. This here is a 2004 Fender Precision bass. It's also US. I got it in 2008 from Guitar Center. Shout out to John Lowe of 10 Ton Hammer and Rock Bottom for the sick hookup. But this bass has clearly seen better days. It's been thrown across many different rooms when I've failed to control my temper, which is pretty often. I've used basement pillars as slides by like running the neck across it. So this thing's definitely beat up, but it's probably the best sounding instrument I own. It's pretty stock. It's a 2004, I believe. And it came with an S1 switch, which to me, that just meant the make it sound bad switch. So I had that ripped out by Kevin at Richboro Music. Thank you, Kevin. I also replaced the white pickguard with a black pickguard, which doesn't fit because you can see there's all these screw holes that nothing goes in, which is great. And I also removed the black pickup covers with an all parts cream pickup cover set. This bass sounds really great recorded. Most recordings that I'm on, I use this bass. It just accepts effects really well. It plays really well. It probably could use a fret dressing and a little bit of love, but definitely something I'm never gonna get rid of. I've had this bass for almost, like I guess almost 15 years now, and it's definitely seen the most amount of shows, and anytime I think I want to get rid of it, I just don't. So yeah, so those are the basses that I usually use in Time and in general. Let's talk about my board. So I have right here the basic Boss TU3 tuner. I actually prefer the TU2, but you can't find them anywhere. Only because I'm kind of like a Luddite and I'm really bad at stuff that has a lot of features. And this thing, I've turned on it looks like an airplane runway if you hit the wrong button, and it gets really hard to tune, especially on stage when all kinds of stuff is popping off. But definitely not a guy for polytuners, I don't think. Just the idea of hitting all the strings and seeing 19 different things out of tune just gives me anxiety. So I stick with the tried and true Boss tuner. This right here, this space on my pedal board is a little bit more fluid because it's for overdrive. Currently on my board right now, I have a Darkglass Alpha Omega. Shout out to Doug at Darkglass for making really sick products. Liam Wilson from Dillinger Escape Plan. I took a couple lessons with him and he got me introduced to Darkglass. And I started collecting their pedals, I want to say around 2016. And I've had 3. I hope to get more. but this thing is really vicious. It can kind of oscillate between a more classic tone or something that's very, I hate this expression, very genty and very just kind of modern and screaming. It's really great for punching through a mix, which I find that I have to do a lot in time. Again, 3 guitar players, chords all over the place. This is a MXR Phase 90. It's a really simple phaser. You just kind of have this speed control, and then that's it. It's one depth. It's like a square wave. It is really great for just making a part, give you like that seasick feeling, or just adding some characteristics to what you're playing. In time, I use it in Hope You Hurt Like I Do, at the suggestion of our guitar player, John Hunt. So we kind of nerd out with setting our speeds at the same time, so we kind of can sync up with the phasing. And so it's a fun pedal. It's definitely a one-trick pony, but in all the best ways. And then at the end here, I have a Boss digital delay. It's a DD3. I actually really like the DD5, but I had a hard time finding it, so I found this one for really cheap on Reverb. It's cool to make little segue effects when you use the sampling format on it. The hold, you also can just make a sound hold indefinitely, which is really cool. It's also really useful if you go out of tune or if you break a string, you just hit your delay pedal and make a bunch of noise until you figure out what's going on. So that's where that becomes useful. So this is my board as it currently sits for time. So I said that the overdrive section of my pedal board was fluid. I just want to talk a little bit about other overdrive pedals I use occasionally. This is a Darkglass vintage microtubes. It's not something I would use for time because it's a little woollier. It kind of does that Ampeg SVT job really well. It's with time, you want something that's going to punch in a little bit more. This kind of just, it's a more brown signal, so you're going to get some character and it can spice up a dry signal going through. But in time, again, there's 3 guitars, there's a lot of layers, so punching through, being percussive is kind of the name of the game. So I don't really use this one that often, but it's still a great pedal and still something that I think anybody who plays bass should have in their collection. So this is kind of like a Swiss Army knife of pedals. This is an Ampeg SCR DI. It's kind of like a Tech 21 SansAmp killer, but I might like the SansAmp more. This is really useful if you have to play shows and you're using the house like bass setup, which I do a lot. I don't like trucking amps around. To me, the romance of unloading gear at 3 o'clock in the morning went away in my 20s. So whatever I can do to kind of be as efficient as possible, even if it means using a house setup, I'll do it. If you put this thing in front of a garbage amplifier, it can really make it sound great. The Ampeg preamp here can really clean up any signal, can make it almost sound like, I guess, one of their Ampeg solid state combos. It probably does a really great job of replicating. And then the scrambler distortion is useful in a pinch. Not my favorite distortion, but it definitely does the job. It definitely can get, you can get rock and roll, you can kind of get like a metal thing going. Again, not my favorite distortion, but that doesn't mean it's not sick in a pinch. So this is, occasionally I'll take this instead of my pedal board, and it does the job whenever I have to use kind of just what's in front of me at a venue. This is a really fun pedal. It's a Boss RC500 loop station. Up until now, we haven't utilized loops and samples live, but I am beginning to design them on my computer. And just using guitar, using MIDI, using synthesizers, using like pre-recorded loops, and using like a vintage drum machine, I can come up with things that enable really interesting segues between songs. Also, John Van Dyne, our drummer, does a little bit of production on the side too. So being able to kind of create these loops and load them into the Boss RC500 is great. You can do one-shots, you can do layering, it's got dual tracks. It also has a built-in drum machine, which is really, really useful. I don't think it's that intuitive to use on this small screen, but that's okay. I kind of just use this as almost like a sample bank. So this is great. I'm working on how to incorporate it into my pedal board, and eventually it's going to require bigger real estate than this. So this, I'm really excited to kind of utilize as we play more shows in support of Hydrangea. Lastly, I'd like to show you my amplifier. This is a Mesa Boogie Subway D800. It's 800 watts of solid state power. It's great. It weighs, I don't know, it weighs fewer than 10 pounds. It fits in a knapsack, and it beats having to take my other amp, which is like an 80-pound SVT Classic, fully tube, and it's enormous. This is Class D. It can power an 8x10 cabinet, and it sounds phenomenal. It's very dark. It's very different than, say, like an Ampeg tone. It's got just very, it's dark is the only thing I can really come up with. It's almost like a blank canvas. You just have your 3 frequency pads, low, mid, and high. It's got some decent onboard drive, but it really takes effects well, and you can really color the tone. This thing with the Ampeg SCR DI in front of it sounds phenomenal. Again, but the practicality is really where it's at. Don't really like loading heavy gear, not really into that anymore. This usually plays really well with whatever a sound guy's DI box is gonna be. It also has a really handy headphone jack for practicing at home, so that's pretty cool. And I never really owned Mesa stuff until this past year when Time started playing bigger shows with a lot of pro audio, and it's just coming in really handy. I remember I got turned on to Class D amplifiers by Abby, who plays bass in the band Ramona. Shout out to Ramona. She used a Mark bass amplifier, which was probably half the size of this, but I said, you know what, it's a lot more practical than carrying around an enormous tube amplifier. Now, there's something to be said for how you can't replicate how great those tube amplifiers sound, but from a practicality standpoint, it's just not there for me anymore in my old age. This gets the job done really well. Paul in Time calls it my Xbox 360, which I think is really funny. And it's kind of like that, and that's great. But yeah, so that's my gear, and thank you very much, and for paying attention to something you probably don't really care that much about. All right, thanks.